Good evening, fellow travelers of time. Tonight, you and I will embark on a different kind of journey, one where comfort is stripped away, and reality, raw and relentless, replaces the glossy tales you've heard before. Forget the shimmering castles of Disney dreams, forget the chivalrous knights polished by fairy tales. This evening, we pull back the velvet curtain and step into the gritty, damp, and utterly unforgiving streets of medieval Europe. Imagine this, you close your eyes for a moment, and when you open them, the year is 1325. The air is thick with wood smoke and unwashed bodies. And your first realization? You're already in the thick of it. Alive, yes, but just barely. But before we begin this rather humbling stroll through history, I invite you to do something for yourself. Find a cozy spot, let your body sink into your soft, modern mattress, an invention your medieval self would have sold their soul for. And if, by some chance, the echoes of these stories help lull you into sleep, consider subscribing and joining this quiet rebellion against polished bedtime stories. I also love hearing where you're listening from. Is it midnight in Michigan? Dawn in Denmark? Let me know in the comments. It reminds us that while history may separate us by centuries, tonight, through this story, we are all together. Now dim the lights. Let the soft hum of a fan mimic the wind whistling through your medieval hovel. And let's begin our descent, not into dreams, but into the day-to-day nightmare that was the Middle Ages. Welcome, friends, to a world where you wouldn't last a single day. You awaken not to the gentle chime of your smartphone, nor the cozy embrace of downy sheets. Instead, your consciousness stirs to the hollow, mournful clang of a church bell, an iron-voiced alarm clock from a world that has never heard of time zones, nor cares for your comfort. The year is 1325. And you? You are alive. But that, dear listener, is the only good news. The air that greets your lungs is heavy, tasting of damp wood, livestock, and the sharp, sour tang of unwashed humanity. There's no mistaking it. This isn't the scent of fresh linen or the perfume of lavender fields. This is the dense, suffocating aroma of survival. You glance around, or rather you try to. Your dwelling is barely more than a wooden box. One room. One family. One shared existence with the rats, the fleas, the lice, and a chicken who seems disturbingly at ease sleeping by your face. Your bed, or the thing that dares to call itself a bed, is a tattered heap of straw, rotting from the inside, saturated with months of sweat, rain, and the occasional accident from the goat your cousin lets wander in at night. No memory foam, no soft throw blanket from your favorite store. Just you, a wool blanket as stiff and crusty as your neighbor's bread, and the creeping cold that seeps into your bones like an unwelcome spirit. And oh, the cold. It bites. Not the crisp, romanticized cold of a winter postcard, but a cruel, damp chill that gnaws at your joints. You are 22 years old. And yet, here, in this place, at this time, you're already considered halfway through the journey of your life. Your body aches as if it has labored for a lifetime, because, by medieval standards, it has. When you stretch, your back protests like an old ship groaning against the waves. Your knees sound like gravel shaken in a wooden bowl. And every step you take is a gamble between stepping into last night's rain, which seeps relentlessly through the thatch roof, or something worse left by the animals, or perhaps even your own family. Privacy? A modern indulgence. Your home is a masterpiece of medieval open-concept living. You, your siblings, your parents, and maybe that strange uncle who refuses to leave all share this one sacred space. Every cough, every sigh, every bodily function, a communal affair. You are never alone here. Not truly. Because in this world, your constant companions are not just family, but an invisible army of fleas, lice, bedbugs, and an assortment of rodents who, like you, have no choice but to endure. You may think this is the worst of it. But no, my friend. This is only the dawn of your day. Before the work, before the hunger, before the humiliation of medieval hygiene rituals, this is how your day begins. In a pile of misery, tangled in a life that smells like what barren floor and stale ale, with the promise that things can, and will, get worse. So gather yourself, pull that rough tunic over your aching frame, brace yourself for the next indignity, because in this world, survival is not a right. It's a battle you fight from the moment you open your eyes. Tonight, as you lay in your soft bed, sipping clean water from a glass, remember this morning in 1325. Remember the cold. Remember the filth. And remember that even the simple act of waking up was a victory in itself. Shall we continue? Because now nature calls, and in the 14th century, nature never calls politely. Now that you have managed to scrape yourself from the straw mound masquerading as a bed, you are faced with an urgent, primal necessity. Nature is calling, loudly. And in the Middle Ages, answering that call is not just inconvenient, it is a public spectacle, a humiliation ritual, and a gamble with your dignity. There is no porcelain throne awaiting you, no flush handle, no gentle roll of triple-ply paper. Your lavatory is a wooden bucket, tucked haphazardly behind your home, or if you're particularly unlucky, it's already full thanks to Uncle Edric's unfortunate encounter with spoiled turnip stew. And the smell? Biblical. You do your business as quickly as your numb, aching limbs allow. Holding your breath? Useless. The stench is an oppressive fog that clings to your nostrils long after the deed is done. But here comes the most medieval part of this medieval ritual. You toss the contents into the street. Yes, the same street where children play, merchants shout, and lovers steal glances. The same street that doubles as the town's open sewer, a foul river of human waste, animal droppings, and an ever-changing medley of mysterious, slimy substances no one dares to investigate. By custom, you are supposed to yell, "Guard our low!" Old French for, "Watch out below." But does anyone actually move in time? Rarely. And if you are among the unfortunate masses crammed into the city's shadowy alleyways, you may be lucky enough to share a public latrine, an open-air bench with multiple holes, where strangers sit elbow to elbow, exchanging gossip while collectively contemplating the futility of personal space. No walls, no partitions, no shame. And what of toilet paper? A fantasy. You wipe with straw, leaves, or, on days of exceptional luxury, a scrap of linen. Sometimes you wipe with nothing at all, a truth that might explain why handshakes have yet to become a social norm. But surely the nobles have it better? Not by much. Even in grand stone castles, the so-called garderobe is just a wooden seat perched over a hole that empties directly into the moat. A clever design, until your enemies, quite literally, climb in through the back door. Yes, you heard that right. Whether you are a serf, a merchant, or a lord draped in fur-lined robes, the ritual of relieving oneself is always a moment of vulnerability, discomfort, and ever-present danger. One misstep on the slippery, sewage-slick stones and you're face first in the collective leftovers of humanity. And you haven't even brushed your teeth yet. But don't worry. We'll get to that fragrant ordeal soon enough. For now, you've survived your medieval bathroom adventure. And that, my friend, is no small feat. But the day has only begun. Your stomach growls, your body aches, and the hope for a hearty breakfast flickers dimly in your mind. Shall we see what's on the menu? Let's just say, prepared to lower your expectations. You've survived the night. You've conquered the bucket of horrors. Surely now, some small comfort awaits. A warm breakfast, perhaps? Something to soothe your aching body and fortify you for the brutal day ahead? Alas, in 1325, the only thing on your breakfast table is disappointment, served cold. You squat near the meager warmth of the hearth, a hearth that doubles as your stove, your heater, and your family's only defense against the relentless damp. And waiting for you is the culinary masterpiece of the peasant world, pottage. Ah, pottage. If disappointment had a flavor, this would be it. It's a grey, gelatinous stew of whatever scraps you could scavenge from your garden, your lord's leftovers, or the forest floor, roots, wilted greens, the occasional lucky bean, and more often than not, mystery ingredients that have been simmering in the same pot for days, if not weeks. Pottage is not a meal. It is an ongoing experiment. One where new ingredients are mercilessly dumped atop old ones until the flavors meld into something that tastes less like food and more like survival. On the side, you're gifted a hunk of bread. But this is no bakery fresh baguette. This bread is a hardened slab of barley or rye, bulked up with sawdust, mashed acorns, or if you're especially cursed, a hint of last season's ground up beans that have long since given up hope. It's not meant to be sliced. It's meant to be negotiated. You don't eat this bread. You battle it. Every bite is a struggle, your teeth grinding against a mass so dense it might very well be the first medieval dental plan. Break your teeth before they rot naturally. And what do you wash it all down with? Perhaps a steaming mug of coffee? An oat milk latte? A refreshing glass of orange juice? Dream on. Your drink of choice is beer. Yes, beer. At sunrise. But not the crisp, refreshing kind you might enjoy after a hard day's labor. This is small beer, weak in alcohol, high in safety. Because the village, well, it's a roulette of disease, parasites, and floating surprises best left unexamined. Even the children drink beer. Not because they crave it, but because the alternative might kill them faster. And forget about luxuries like meat or cheese. Those are festival foods, reserved for the rare Sunday feast or the occasional saint's day when your lord is feeling generous. Most peasants see meat maybe twice a year, and fruit only when it's in season and hasn't already fermented into wine. And spices? Forget it. Pepper costs more than your entire month's labor. Salt is precious enough to be locked away like a family heirloom. So you gulp down your lukewarm, frothy beer. You gnaw on your brick of bread. And you slurp your ancient, gritty pottage while trying not to think about the rat you caught licking the rim of the pot last night. Does it fill you? Not really. But in medieval Europe, breakfast isn't about satisfaction. It's about enduring until the next meal, which might be just as grim, if you're lucky. And now, with your stomach reluctantly filled, it's time for the next cruel joke of the day, getting dressed. Spoiler alert, it won't make you feel any better. But we'll get to that shortly. Your belly now groans beneath a heavy sludge of pottage and sour beer. You'd think perhaps, just perhaps, the simple act of dressing would offer a scrap of dignity to start your day. But here, in the year 1325, dignity is as scarce as fresh bread. Your wardrobe, if you can even call it that, consists of exactly one outfit. 1. A coarse, scratchy tunic of faded wool or, if you are among the marginally fortunate, threadbare linen. Fashion? That's a concept for lords, ladies, and the artist yet unborn to paint them. For you, there is only the daily ritual of dragging your stiff, dirt-caked garments over your aching frame, praying they hold together for one more day. These clothes, you've worn them every day, every season, every storm. They've soaked in your sweat, your tears, and things we need not mention in polite company. They smell less like fabric and more like a compost heap left to marinate in a pigsty. And washing them? A Herculean task. You would need to lug buckets of river water, If you're brave enough to face the leeches and local bandits, then boil it over an open fire, scrub your tunic with ash or lye, and hang it to dry in the faint, reluctant sun. And yet, by the time it's dry, 3 days later, it will already stink again. And your shoes? If you own any, they are thin strips of untreated leather, stitched together by someone with more enthusiasm than skill. They offer all the support of a damp cabbage leaf. Most peasants walk barefoot. Through mud. Through dung. Through the endless, disease-riddled quagmires of the medieval landscape. But the true enemy isn't the cold ground. It's what's living on your skin. Your body is an ecosystem in itself, a thriving metropolis of fleas, lice, bedbugs, and ticks. They crawl freely through your hair, your clothes, your bedding. Everyone has them. From lords to monks to kings and queens. There is no escape. You scratch your scalp with a wooden spoon while chatting with the village priest. No one blinks. You claw at your rash-covered armpits during dinner. No one cares. Your skin is raw, blistered, and irritated. You itch constantly, a permanent, crawling reminder that your body is not entirely your own. If a rash blooms across your back, too bad. There are no doctors, no ointments, no soothing creams. You endure. Or you don't. Even children, tiny and wide-eyed, are walking insect farms, scratching themselves in lullabies of discomfort, while their parents pretend not to notice. And so, as you dress yourself in layers of itchy misery, wrapping your body in damp, threadbare wool, you realize something that every medieval peasant learns early. Comfort is not a right. It is a memory. A distant, impossible dream. But dressed you must be. For outside awaits the labor that will break your back, bend your knees, and steal what little strength your bread and beer have left you. And speaking of smiles, let's not. Because in the Middle Ages, even a grin can be a dangerous thing. But that, dear traveler, is a tale for our next chapter. Now that you're dressed in your itchy armor of misery, and your feet are hardened by mud and misfortune, you might think it's time to flash your best medieval smile and greet the day. But here's a word of advice from the forgotten corners of history. Don't. Because in this world, your smile is not a sign of joy. It's a battlefield, and it's losing the war. In 1325, oral hygiene is a concept as foreign as indoor plumbing. There are no toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no cozy corner store stocked with minty mouthwash. Most villagers clean their teeth, if they bother at all, by rubbing them with a cloth, chewing on aromatic twigs, or swishing wine or vinegar around their gums in a desperate, drunken attempt to ward off decay. But the truth is simple and brutal. Your teeth are doomed. By your mid-20s, your mouth is a disaster zone. Cavities fester unchecked, abscesses bubble under swollen gums, and what remains of your teeth is often blackened, broken, and more rot than enamel. It's not just unpleasant. It's lethal. A simple toothache, something we might fix with a quick trip to the pharmacy today, can become a death sentence. Without antibiotics, a festering infection can spread to your bloodstream, leading to sepsis. Your final days spent feverish, delirious, and in agony, clutching your swollen jaw as your neighbors whisper about your sins. And the cure? If you can even call it that. Enter the barber surgeon, a man who, in the same day, might trim your hair, bleed you with leeches, and pull your rotting molar from your jaw using an iron hook by flickering candlelight. No anesthesia. No sterilized tools. Just the grim rhythm of your screams mixing with the prayers of those watching. And if you survive, congratulations. You've earned a lifetime of chronic pain, foul breath, and the quiet certainty that your next toothache might finish what the first one started. Kissing? A luxury few can afford. In a world where halitosis is as common as dirt and decay hides behind every smile, Courtship is less about romance and more about alliances, livestock, and land. Your worth is not in your grin, it's in your harvest, your dowry, your social rank. Your mouth? Just another battlefield in a life filled with them. And yet, the day marches on. Your aching, infected gums will not save you from the real work ahead. The sun is rising higher, and your Lord does not care about your dental woes. Time to head to the fields. Time to labor until your bones creak and your spirit fades. But first, let's take a moment to truly understand the medieval job market. A world where your career path is simple, brutal, and utterly unforgiving. Shall we? And now, my weary traveler, with your aching teeth, your swollen joints, and your stomach still grumbling from its gritty pottage, it's time to face the heart of your medieval existence. Work. Not the kind with casual Fridays, ergonomic chairs, or inspirational posters. This is the pure, unrelenting, bone-grinding labor of a medieval peasant. Your career path? Preordained by birth. You are not chasing promotions. You are chasing survival. Your office is the field. Your desk? The dirt. Your only benefits package? The faint hope that this year's harvest won't fail and that your children will outlive the village pigs. You rise with the sun, not because you're an early bird, but because failing to do so might earn you a lash from your Lord's steward or worse, the silent disapproval of your neighbors who, like you, have long accepted that rest is a fantasy. 6 days a week, you work from dawn until the last sliver of light sinks behind the trees. Sundays? A day of supposed rest, but only if the crops aren't screaming for harvest, the raiders aren't at the village gates, or your family isn't sick with the creeping fever from the tainted water. Your tools are as primitive as your prospects. A splintered wooden hoe, a rusty sickle, and your own battered body. You dig trenches. You sow seeds. You weed, carry, haul, bend, sweat, and curse until your back curves like the question mark that hangs over every medieval sunrise. Will today be the day something finally breaks you? And what of mental health, you ask? There is no such thing. There is no counselor, no comforting ear, no word for burnout. Exhaustion is a fact of life, not a topic of conversation. And if you are a woman, double congratulations. Your workload doesn't end in the fields. You return home to nurse screaming infants, cook the same lifeless gruel, mend clothes worn into transparency, spin wool into thread, tend the animals, and pretend not to notice the lice slowly migrating from your husband's side of the bed to yours. Children? They begin working by the age of 5. School is a luxury no one in your village can afford. Their toys are sticks and stones, their classroom is the field, and their education is a relentless curriculum of labor, hardship, and the faint hope of surviving long enough to inherit your callous hands. And if, by some twist of fate, you are not a farmer, perhaps you are a blacksmith, your lungs filled with smoke and ash, or a tanner, waist-deep in vats of urine used to soften hides, or a cooper, crafting barrels while your fingers bleed from splinters. The pay? Subsistence. The perks? Occasional bleeding, infections, and the quiet knowledge that if you break a bone, no one is coming to help you. Drink some lukewarm beer, bind it with rags, and keep working. Because in this world, if you stop working, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, you don't live. Your job is not a career. It is not a calling. It is an endurance test. A slow, grinding march toward an early grave. But you still have to endure the weather. And in the Middle Ages, the sky itself is your most merciless boss. But we'll get to that. Because now, the winds of winter are rising, and your damp, woolen tunic is no match for what the heavens have in store. You might think that after surviving the filth, the hunger, the back-breaking labor, and the ceaseless gnawing of parasites, Perhaps the sky itself might grant you a moment of reprieve. But in 1325, the heavens offer no kindness. They are not your friend. They are your most unpredictable, merciless overseer. In the dead of winter, your hut is a sieve of suffering. Its walls are thin, splintered planks with gaps wide enough for rats, frost, and despair to crawl through. Your roof, thatched and patchy, leaks with every drizzle, every snowfall, every melting icicle. There is no insulation, no cozy hearthside blanket, no central heating humming comfort into your bones. Only the fickle, flickering warmth of a dying fire, if you can afford to keep it lit. Firewood? It is precious, expensive, and in some forests, gathering it is illegal, reserved for the Lord's men alone. Caught foraging the wrong stick from the wrong tree, and you might find yourself fined, imprisoned, or worse. So you shiver, wrapped in your one damp tunic, huddled with your family like so many fleas clinging to the last embers of warmth. Your breath frosts the air inside your own home. Your toes freeze and crack in your tattered shoes. Your fingers stiffen until they feel like little medieval icicles. Frostbite? There's no name for it. It's just called bad luck. But if you think summer brings mercy, think again. Come summer, your wooden box of a house transforms into a clay oven, trapping heat like an inferno. There are no windows. Only ragged cloths stretched across empty holes that serve as poor excuses for ventilation. There are no fans. No cross breeze. No escape. Your body swelters beneath layers of wool and linen, because to shed them would invite scandal, sunburn, and biting insects eager to taste your sweaty flesh. The flies arrive in clouds, drawn to your unwashed body and the stew pot fermenting in the corner. Mosquitoes sing their maddening song by your ear as you lie awake, too hot to sleep, too exhausted to move. You cannot rest. You cannot stop working. The fields do not care about the heat. Neither does your Lord. The sun beats down mercilessly as you toil, your skin blistering, your vision swimming, your clothes soaked in a sour stew of sweat and grime. Heat stroke? They call it taking a bad turn, if they call it anything at all. No ointments. No shade. No escape. And throughout the seasons, the same eternal miseries accompany you. Your skin itches. Your food is bland and suspect. Your back screams in pain. And your clothes cling to your body like damp, scratchy reminders that comfort is a foreign land you've never known. There is no climate control here. No break from the wrath of the sky. Only the endless, grinding cycle of freeze, swelter, suffer, repeat. And if, in the depths of your misery, you dare wish to freshen up with the splash of cool water, well, I regret to inform you, dear traveler, that the water itself is plotting your demise. But we'll face that bitter truth in our next chapter. You might think that after enduring the cold, the heat, and the filth, the simplest of comforts, a sip of cool, fresh water, would bring a sliver of relief. But no, my weary traveler. In 1325, even water conspires against you. To the untrained eye, the village stream might seem idyllic, its surface shimmering in the dappled sunlight, its current whispering promises of refreshment. But don't be fooled. Upstream, someone's just emptied a chamber pot. Further along, a decomposing pig bloats beneath the reeds, its belly rising and falling with the gentle current. The truth is cruel and simple. This water is teeming with death. Invisible, insidious death. It carries parasites, bacteria, and the unspoken legacies of every villager's most unpleasant moments. It flows with the remnants of waste, the corpses of rats, and the sorrow of those who drank it before you. And that is why even the youngest children sip beer. Not because they crave it, but because it's safer than water. Small beer, weak, watery, barely alcoholic. Not enough to intoxicate, but enough to boil away the worst of the diseases lurking in the village ditch. And if you're among the lucky few wealthy enough to afford it, you might sip watered-down wine at midday, though it's more about status than sanitation. But surely you say they used water for washing, for cleaning, for bathing? In theory, yes. In practice, absolutely not. In the twisted logic of the medieval mind, bathing is dangerous. It opens your pores, you see, letting the bad humors and sinful vapors seep inside. Better to let the layers of dirt, sweat, and grease cake your skin into a protective shell against the dangers of the world. Bathhouses? They existed. But they quickly became known less for hygiene and more for gossip, scandal, and activities that made the church clutch its pearls in horror. So naturally, the church shut them down. And for those stubborn enough to insist on personal cleanliness, bathing was a production worthy of the stage. You would have to haul buckets of questionable water from the nearest well, water that, even on its best day, tasted of damp earth and old iron. Then you need to boil it, filling a wooden tub that leaked as enthusiastically as it filled. And you pray that no one else in your overcrowded household used it before you. Or worse, after. Rain barrels? Another gamble. Birds bathe in them. Insects breed in them. Moss thrives in them. And yet you drink, you wash, you water your crops with it, because you have no choice. But every sip, every splash, is a wager against the unseen world of parasites lurking in every droplet. And if you lose that bet, your final days will be spent curled up on your straw bed, feverish, dehydrated, your stomach writhing in agony as the village priest mutters prayers for your soul. So next time you lift a glass of clear, clean water to your lips, pause for a moment and offer a silent toast to your ancestors, who lived in a world where even the very substance of life might turn against them. But your day is far from over, because if you thought water was dangerous, wait until you meet the doctor. And in the Middle Ages, medicine isn't healing. It's torture wrapped in the polite language of faith and superstition. Shall we face it together in the next chapter? If the water doesn't kill you, your own body might. And when sickness comes, as it always does in this damp, decaying world, there's only one place to turn. The healer, the barber, the priest, the apothecary. In the Middle Ages, they are often one and the same, and their methods? Let's just say, science has not yet made an appearance on this grim stage. Your diagnosis will not come from a careful examination or a well-thumbed medical text. No, your affliction, whether it be a fever, a festering wound, or a mysterious cough, will be blamed on the ancient belief in the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. These are the ingredients of your body, according to the wisdom of the age. Your health? A delicate soup that must be balanced at all costs. Too much blood? Time to bleed you. A fever? Clearly, your blood has grown hot and rebellious. The cure? Open a vein, drain it into a bowl, or invite a colony of leeches to feast upon you. No one asks your permission. The barber surgeon arrives with his dull knife, his iron hook, his smirk hidden behind a poorly washed beard. And the tools? They have not been cleaned since the last victim, sorry, patient, graced his stool. If the sickness lingers, they might prescribe a charming cocktail of herbal purgatives, laxatives, or crushed beetles, meant to evacuate your sinful humors to whichever end nature allows. An ache of the heart? A heaviness of the soul? That's not depression. It's an imbalance of black bile, best treated with a brisk session of vomiting, or perhaps a pilgrimage to a holy relic, if you can afford the journey. And should your condition deteriorate, as it surely will, a priest will be summoned, not to comfort you, but to prepare your soul for the next world, while your loved ones carve your coffin and mutter about your failures as a farmer, a mother, or a man of God. There is no anesthesia, no antiseptics, no understanding of bacteria, germs, or viruses. Diseases are blamed on bad air, unholy living, or the wrath of saints displeased by your impure thoughts. And if your body dares to develop a toothache, a gangrenous finger, or a swollen leg, the cure is as medieval as the world itself. Cut it off. Cauterize it with an iron heated over a fire, not to sterilize, but to frighten the disease into submission, or perhaps into your bloodstream, where it will finish the job. Survive the procedure? Praise be. Die screaming on the floor? Well, perhaps your soul was already lost. And if by some cosmic accident you recover, the barber surgeon will take full credit, the priest will declare it a miracle, and the leech, if it survived, may just earn a promotion. In this world, medicine is not healing. It is performance art laced with polite torture and the faint scent of burning flesh. And yet, you must endure. Because your day, your life, your endless, grinding existence must continue. Even if your body is screaming for rest, for peace, for relief. But what awaits you next is no kinder. Because the sun is setting. And it's time for the only joy left to you, a meal. Or rather, what passes for one. Shall we continue? Evening falls. The sky, streaked with the fading embers of a reluctant sunset, offers no comfort. The day has been long, brutal, and unforgiving. And now, dinner. In the medieval world, dinner is not a reward. It is yet another endurance test. When you must pass, night after night, if you hope to greet another dawn. You gather round the smoldering hearth, the air thick with smoke and the faint, sour scent of old stew reheated for the third, or is it the 13th, time. This is not a feast. This is survival in a bowl. Your meal? Once again pottage. That same unlovable swamp of grains, roots, and limp vegetables that has been simmering endlessly in the blackened pot. By now, it's less food and more ritual. A daily surrender to the grey monotony of peasant cuisine. And if you're lucky, truly blessed by the hand of fate, there might be a thin slice of meat floating in the muck. A scrap from a rat caught in the grain store, perhaps, or a sliver of mutton gifted by your lord's steward, who grew generous after a particularly satisfying tax collection. But more often, it's turnips. Turnips boiled. Turnips mashed. Turnips floating like pale ghosts in a sea of bitter, greasy broth. Your bread remains as hard as a blacksmith's sandal, bolt up with sawdust, bark, or clay to stretch the meager flour rations. And you chew, not because it brings joy, but because hunger demands it. Preservation methods are as primitive as the tools in your hand. There are no fridges, no ice boxes, no neat pantries of pickled delicacies. Your meat hangs covered in flies. Your cheese, if you have any, crawls with invisible armies of bacteria. Your milk turns sour before the sun sets. But you eat. Because you must. Salt, that sacred mineral, is hoarded, guarded like gold. Pepper? A fantasy spice, more valuable than your year's harvest. Your palate learns to accept food flavor not by choice, but by circumstance. You sip your small beer, tepid and flat, knowing it is safer than the village well. Wine, rich and potent, is reserved for your lord's table, not your cracked, wooden bowl. And as you eat, you do so carefully. For even your meal might kill you. Ergot, a fungus that thrives on rye, lurks unseen in your bread. Its poison can cause visions, convulsions, or death. But there's no other choice. Every bite is a gamble. Every spoonful a wager with the invisible world of sickness and spoilage. And if you were foolish enough to hunt for your own game in the Lord's forest, the where, the deer, the rabbits, the fish, They do not belong to you. They are the property of your Lord. And poaching is a crime punished by imprisonment, torture, or death. Your food is not just a meal. It is a political statement. A reminder that you are small, expendable, and utterly at the mercy of the landowners. And so you eat your grey stew by flickering firelight, gnaw your stone-hard bread, sip your thin beer, and hope that tonight's dinner doesn't come back to haunt you before morning. Because in the Middle Ages, food does not comfort. It tests you. And now, as the stars scatter across the night sky, your belly grudgingly full, it is time for the next ritual. Not rest, not dreams, but obedience. Because in this world, even your evenings belong to the church, and to the ever-watchful eyes of your neighbors. But that, my friend, is a tale for our next chapter. Night has fallen. The fields rest. The fires smolder. The weary bodies of your fellow villagers collapse onto their lumpy straw beds. But you cannot yet surrender to sleep. Because in the medieval world, the end of the day does not belong to you. It belongs to God. Or rather, to the men who claim to speak in His name. In the Middle Ages, the church is not a place you visit on Sundays. It is an empire that governs every breath, every bite, every restless dream. It decides when you are born, whom you may marry, how you work, when you pray, what you eat, and most chillingly, how you will die. Its grip on your life is not subtle. It is loud, visible, and ever-present. Every day is rolled by the tolling of the bell. Morning, noon, and night, the village church bell shatters the silence, summoning you to prayer. Not to attend is not merely rude, it is sinful, punishable by whispers, by fines, by worse. You kneel on cold stone floors, your knees raw, your head bowed, your prayers muttered from rote memory. Forget to bow at the right moment? Sin. Eat meat on a Friday? Sin. Let your thoughts wander to your neighbor's wife? Double sin. And if the plague doesn't frighten you, the fires of hell most certainly will. Because the priest painted in glorious, gut-wrenching detail. Rivers of fire, lakes of boiling blood, demons with rusted pitchforks, clawing at your soul for eternity. And you cannot read the Bible yourself. It is written in Latin, a language for priests, monks, and nobles, not for you. You rely entirely on the church to tell you what is right, what is wrong, what is truth, and what is sin. And you obey. Because to question is to risk being labeled a heretic. And in this world, heretics are burned, drowned, or tortured until their bodies confess what their hearts never believed. Tithes are not optional. A tenth of your grain, your livestock, your coin, if you have any, must go to the church. And if you have nothing left to give, then you are both spiritually bankrupt and physically doomed. Even the holidays, those rare days when you might have hope for rest, are holy days filled with fasting, penance, confession. Joy itself is seen as indulgence, a dangerous distraction from the suffering that ensures your place in the kingdom of heaven. And should you dare voice doubt, the stake awaits, the whisper of which or blasphemer is enough to end your life in a blaze of righteousness, cheered on by the same neighbors who once shared your pottage. So you chant, you bow, you confess sins you cannot name, fearing the gaze of the priest, the gaze of your Lord, the gaze of Agnes, your ever-watchful neighbor, who delights in reporting those who seem too joyful, too independent, too free. Because here, in the suffocating shadows of medieval faith, your body may belong to the land, but your soul belongs to the church. And if you dare dream of a life beyond these walls, beyond these prayers, beyond these endless rituals, well, you best pray harder. Because in the Middle Ages, the church is merciless. And now, as the final bell tolls and your day of suffering winds toward restless sleep, remember, there is no privacy. Even in the darkness, you are never truly alone. The fleas, the rats, the cold, and the eyes of your village, always watching. But tomorrow will be worse, especially if you are a woman. But we will walk that path together in the next chapter. If you thought life as a medieval peasant was brutal, unfair, and suffocating, let us now walk a few steps further into the shadows. Because to be a woman in the Middle Ages is to play life on the hardest difficulty setting. No health potions, no reset buttons, no mercy. From the moment you take your first breath, your path is laid before you like a narrow, winding road lined with brambles. You will marry young, not for love, but for alliances, for land, for livestock. By the age of 12, you may already be betrothed. By 14, you may be pregnant. Your body becomes a vessel, a bargaining chip, an object to secure your family's fragile grip on survival. And your opinion? Irrelevant. Once wed, you are no longer seen as your father's daughter, but as your husband's property. Your purpose is simple and relentless. Produce heirs. Feed them. Keep the house running. Keep silent. And if you dare to complain, if you speak too loudly, think too freely, or show too much knowledge of the healing herbs passed down by your grandmother, whispers of which will follow you. And in this world, a woman accused of witchcraft may find herself drowned, burned, or forced to confess sins she never imagined. Childbirth is a death lottery, the most dangerous game you will ever play. There is no midwife with sterile tools, no warm blankets awaiting you in a clean, safe room. You squat on straw, surrounded by women who have seen too much suffering to cry anymore. Every contraction is a gamble with death. A tear, an infection, a baby turned the wrong way. Any of these can steal your life in an instant. And yet, if you survive, there is no rest. Now you have a wailing infant in your lice-infested hut, and you must nurse, clean, cook, and return to the fields as if nothing happened. You don't get a break. You are the break for everyone else. If you are widowed, you are vulnerable. If you are unmarried, you are suspicious. If you are childless, you are cursed. And if you dare stand tall, speak your mind, or know too much, you are dangerous. And dangerous women in the Middle Ages are silenced, often permanently. Even within the church, the only supposed refuge for women of ambition, your role is suffocating. Nuns live under strict vows, behind cold stone walls. No voice. No freedom of movement. No escape from the hierarchy that ranks you beneath every man, no matter how pious. In every corner of your world, you are expected to endure, to obey, to suffer in silence, and yes, to smile. Because even in a time where everyone suffers, women are expected to suffer gracefully. But, and here lies the paradox of history, women still endure. They whisper to each other in the shadows. They heal with forbidden herbs. They tell stories in the dark to keep their dignity alive. They carve their names into the margins of history, even as men try to erase them. They survive. But tomorrow, your trials continue. Because while the night brings darkness, violence in the Middle Ages never sleeps. And next, we shall face it, together. Night does not soften the edges of medieval life. It sharpens them. Because violence in this world is not an aberration. It is the language everyone speaks. It thrums beneath every village quarrel. It simmers in every cramped alley. It bursts forth in the streets, in the fields, in the sanctity of your home. The concept of law and order, as we might recognize it today, is little more than a fragile pretense. Justice is not blind here. It is brutal, public, and arbitrary. Steal a loaf of bread to feed your starving child? You might lose a hand. Accused of lying? Your tongue may be pierced or ripped out entirely. And if you gossip too much? The town's officials might strap the scold's bridle to your head, a grotesque iron mask, complete with a spiked bit jammed into your mouth, silencing you through pain, humiliation, and fear. For more serious offenses, heresy, witchcraft, theft, or the crime of questioning the church, you face a trial by ordeal. Forget judges. Forget juries. Your innocence will be tested by pain. Stick your hand into boiling water to retrieve a stone. If it miraculously heals without infection in 3 days, you are innocent. If not, well, your punishment awaits. Or perhaps they throw you into a river. If you sink, you are innocent, though now dead. If you float, you are guilty, and will suffer accordingly. These were not games. These were public performances, and the entire village would gather to watch, cheer, and feast upon your suffering like they would a Sunday roast. And executions? They were events. Hangings, beheadings, burnings at the stake. All done in the town square, the stench of death mingling with the scent of meat pies sold by cheerful vendors to the hungry, curious crowds. In the home, violence is no stranger. It is accepted, expected, even encouraged. Husbands discipline wives. Parents discipline children. Neighbors discipline each other over disputes about pigs, plots of land, or imagined insults. And war. War is a constant. If you are not dying in the fields, you are dying on the battlefield. Local feuds simmer. Territorial disputes fester. Religious crusades flare into bloodshed. Someone, somewhere, is always sharpening a blade, marching to war, or hunting for an enemy to stab in the name of honor, God, or sheer boredom. For you, the ordinary villager, violence is not a breakdown of the social order. It is the social order. It is how debts are settled, how power is enforced, how control is maintained. You walk the streets with your head down. You avoid eye contact. You keep your opinions to yourself. Because at any moment, a careless word, a sideways glance, or an unlucky day might see you face down in the mud, beaten by the very people who shared your pottage the night before. The Middle Ages is not a world of peace. It is a fragile, grinding truce between constant outbursts of violence, blood, and fear. And yet, through it all, you endure. Because to survive is to accept that death may come for you in many forms. But in the Middle Ages, death is never far. And now, my friend, it is time to face that grim truth. Because in our next chapter, we will confront the inevitable ending of most medieval lives. An early, unglamorous, and often forgotten death. But you and I, we will not look away. We will walk that road together. And now, my weary traveler, we have arrived at the most inevitable chapter of medieval life. Death. It is not a whispered fear here. It is a constant companion, a shadow that lingers at the edge of every moment, every meal, every dream. In 1325, death is not something that comes quietly in old age, after a long life filled with comforts. It comes early. It comes often. And it comes in forms so brutal, so indifferent, they hardly warrant a second glance from your neighbors. If you live past the age of 40, you are a statistical miracle, a living relic, a walking wonder. They may even call you the Old One. But such a title is not a badge of honor. It is a reminder that you have beaten odds that most never will. Because in this world, half of all children will never see their 5th birthday. They are claimed by hunger, by plague, by the chill of an unforgiving winter, or by the unseen masters hiding in every sip of tainted water. If you survive childhood, your body is already battered. By your 20s, your bones ache like an old man's. You limp through your days missing teeth, fingers, perhaps an eye, a life whittled away by accidents, infections, and the slow erosion of hope. For women, death most often comes through childbirth, the most dangerous passage a body can endure. No pain relief. no medical intervention. Just the cold comfort of whispered prayers, hot water, and a handful of trembling hands holding you as you bleed out on a straw-stuffed pallet. For men, the threats are different, but no less relentless. A simple farming accident, a rusty blade in a tavern brawl, a splinter festering into a limb-rotting infection, a crusade gone sideways, or the cold indifference of a passing bandit, all are enough to end your story in an instant. And if those don't claim you, the plague will. It sweeps through towns and villages like a hungry god, turning entire streets into mass graves overnight. The living dig hurried holes, tossing in the dead without ceremony, without mourning, without time to speak their names. Famine is no kinder. It arrives like a slow, hollow ache, dragging entire seasons of suffering behind it, thinning out villages until only whispers remain. And death doesn't always arrive as a grand, dramatic affair. Sometimes it comes from something as small, as laughable, as a spoiled loaf of bread, its hidden toxins twisting your mind into hallucinations before stealing your breath. And if you're fortunate, if the plague passes you by, if your body resists the worms in the bread, if your husband's rage misses its mark, you may earn yourself a funeral. A simple hole in the dirt. No polished coffin. No embalming. No marble headstone. Perhaps a few murmured prayers. Perhaps not. Because by the time your body is placed into the earth, the village has already moved on. They must. For the living have no room for the dead. They are too busy fighting their own daily war against the same fate. In the Middle Ages, you do not retire. You do not grow old in comfort. You simply stop showing up. And that is your exit. But my friend, the most bitter truth of all is yet to come. Because while your body may finally rest, your soul must still face the greatest unknown of all. And as the medieval world reminds you at every turn, death is not the end. It is only the beginning. But for that, we shall open the next chapter together. When you think of the Middle Ages, perhaps your mind drifts to grand castles glowing under torchlight, gallant knights in shining armor, noble ladies in silk gowns awaiting rescue from lofty towers. But now, having walked these grimy streets, having tasted the bland gruel, labored in the fields, suffered through sickness, hunger, and humiliation, you know the truth. That version of the Middle Ages? It is a lie. A polished fable whispered by fairy tales, gilded by storybooks, painted by artists centuries removed from the mud, the blood, and the unrelenting misery of real medieval life. Knights? They are not noble heroes roaming the land in search of wrongs to right. They are brutal enforcers of the feudal order, their swords loyal not to justice, but to the lords who command them. Their armor? It is not worn to protect the weak. It is worn to protect themselves as they march into villages, burn homes, collect taxes, punish poachers, and ensure that the peasants know their place. And those grand castles? From the outside, they might gleam with wealth. But inside? They are stone prisons, damp, drafty, infested with fleas, lice, and political marriages colder than the winter air seeping through the cracks. Even the nobility are prisoners in their own gilded cages. They are pawns in endless games of power, their lives bound by duty, alliances, betrayals, and the quiet, suffocating terror of knowing that a single wrong word, a single bad harvest, a single plague could bring them to ruin. For them, life is a feast laced with fear. They sip fine wine from silver goblets, knowing their enemies plot just beyond the flickering candlelight. And the peasants? They do not dream of glory, of romance, of courtly dances. They dream of survival, of an extra loaf of bread, of a winter that does not steal their children. Upward mobility? A fantasy. If you are born poor, you stay poor. If you are born rich, you cling to your titles while the world conspires to pull you into the same dirt that swallows your serfs. And yet, Even the nobles, with their fur-lined cloaks and overflowing banquet tables, are never far from misery. A single bad bowl of stew can kill them just as swiftly as any peasant. A splinter can fester into a death sentence. Their castles, their armor, their titles, none of it protects them from the plague, from famine, from the whims of a cruel, indifferent world. The Middle Ages is not a time of simplicity. It is a time of relentless survival, where every task hurts more, takes longer, and costs more than you can afford. Where joy is a fleeting, dangerous indulgence, and suffering is the only certainty. And yet, through all of this, through the filth, the toil, the fear, people still laugh. They still sing songs beneath the stars. They tell stories beside the hearth. They fall in love, they dance, they hope. Not because life is beautiful, but because humans, no matter the era, are stubborn creatures. They carve out moments of light in the darkest chapters of history. They resist. They endure. And tonight, as you slip into your modern bed, surrounded by the comforts your ancestors could never have imagined, perhaps spare a thought for those who came before you, who lived, loved, and suffered, so that you might never have to. But our journey is not yet over, because while the common people struggled to endure the dirt, the cold, and the cruelty of the everyday, behind the castle walls, there were those who would stop at nothing to seize power, to rewrite history in their image. And next, we shall meet them, while the peasants toil in the fields, clinging to survival. Inside the stone walls of the castles, another kind of struggle unfolds. One no less brutal, one no less deadly, but fought not with hoes and plows, but with whispered words, forged alliances, and carefully calculated betrayals. Because behind the great wooden gates of the noble halls, life is a chessboard. Every step, every nod, every arranged marriage, every shared glance across the flicker of candlelight is a move. And a wrong move? It can end with your head displayed on a spike outside your own castle walls. Here, power is fragile. It is not earned, it is seized, stolen, bought with favors, marriages, betrayals, and blood. The lords and ladies you might imagine as draped in silks and laughter? They are hollow-eyed players in a game that has no finish line. A game where even the most powerful are constantly surrounded by enemies in silk gloves, offering poisoned smiles. Marriages are not about love. They are treaties. They are political weapons used to expand lands, secure alliances, prevent wars, or spark them. Children? They are bargaining chits. Your daughter may be wed to an aging dupe twice her age, not for romance, but to gain a border fortress, a title, a foothold in someone else's fragile domain. Your son may be sent to a rival court, not to learn, but to be a living hostage ensuring your family's loyalty. Every banquet hides daggers beneath the table. Every feast is a display of wealth designed to intimidate, to distract, to veil the scheming whispered behind closed doors. Poison? Oh, it flows freely in the noble courts, more common than wine. A subtle sip of bitterness in your goblet. A sweet fruit concealing your doom. A noble's death is rarely honest. More often, it comes from a trusted advisor, a jealous cousin, a scorned wife, or a rival house cloaked in false alliances. Even within the castle walls, you trust no one. Servants spy for other lords. Priests report to rival bishops. Guards can be bought, bribed, seduced. Your only safety? To play the game better than the others. To lie more convincingly. To smile while sharpening your own blade beneath the velvet cloak. But know this. Even the most cunning players cannot cheat death. No title protects you from the plague, from famine, from the wrath of the peasants should they rise in fury with torches in hand. The great halls make litter with jewels, the goblets may overflow with rare wines. But the castle walls cannot hold back the creeping rod of fear, decay, and the endless churn of betrayal that feeds the noble class from within. And while they play their dangerous games beyond the walls, the world suffers. But sometimes the world pushes back. In our next chapter, we will witness what happens when the peasants dare to challenge the throne. A rebellion so fierce, so unexpected, it shook an empire to its core. Shall we walk together into that storm? For generations, the peasants bent their backs. They toiled in the mud, endured the hunger, swallowed their rage. They whispered their discontent in the shadows, behind locked doors, over bowls of bitter pottage. But history shows us a truth as old as the soil itself. Even the most patient fields will one day sprout storms. And when they did, the world behind the castle walls trembled. In the 14th century, across the breadth of Europe, a fury long simmering in the hearts of the common people finally erupted into open revolt. In England, they called it the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. A tidal wave of farmers, blacksmiths, craftsmen, and widows rose against the crushing weight of taxes, of laws written in languages they could not read, of lords who took everything and gave nothing in return. Led by men like Wat Tyler, they stormed through the countryside, their tools turned into weapons, their hunger for justice outweighing their fear of the sword. They burned manors. They tore down tax offices. They dragged officials from their homes and made them answer for their greed. For a brief, fiery moment, the mighty city of London itself shook under the footsteps of the barefoot, the broken, the forgotten. They demanded an end to the poll taxes, an end to serfdom, a recognition of their humanity. And for a flicker of time, the ruling class listened. But history, ever cruel, turned its wheel once more. Promises were made, then broken. Wat Tyler was lured into negotiations. And there, in front of his people, he was cut down, murdered by the king's men. His followers scattered, hunted, executed. The rebellion ended in blood and betrayal. But its echo lingered. Because though the revolt was crushed, the nobles never forgot the sound of the peasants' footsteps pounding at their gates. And neither did the peasants. In France, in the Jacquerie, the same rage ignited the countryside. Peasants, beaten down by war, taxes, and famine, rose with a ferocity born of desperation. They set noble estates ablaze. They slaughtered the aristocrats who had fed off their suffering for too long. But the knights rode back with steel and fire. The peasants were massacred, their heads displayed as warnings, their villages reduced to ashes. But again, the fear lingered, because the ruling class understood, perhaps for the first time, that the very people they trampled could rise like a storm when the burden grew too heavy. And though these rebellions were crushed, though the crowns remained upon the heads of kings, the message was clear. Power built upon the backs of the starving, the sick, and the silenced can only stand for so long before the earth beneath it shakes. Even the most gilded throne cannot withstand the fury of those who have nothing left to lose. These rebellions were not the last. They were not the largest. But they were the rumbling premonition of what would come centuries later, when the flames of revolution would rise higher, hotter, and consume even the tallest castles. But that is a tale for another age. For now, as the fires of rebellion are stamped out, the nobles retreat behind higher walls, and the peasants return to their fields, their chains heavier, but their dreams, perhaps, just perhaps, a little sharper. But as we return to our village, battered by failed rebellion, haunted by broken promises, we must face the bitter truth that life in the Middle Ages, no matter your station, is a constant negotiation with fear, hunger, and death. But there were those rare few who refused to accept that fate. In our next chapter, we shall meet them. The women, the outcasts, the visionaries who carved their names into the shadows of history. Shall we? In a world where obedience was survival, Where bending the knee was the only language the powerful understood, there were still those rare, defiant souls who stood upright. They were the outcasts, the rebels, the dreamers, those who dared to question a world built on submission. And most of them were women. In the Middle Ages, to be a woman with knowledge, with defiance, with a voice too loud, too bold, too unwilling to break under the weight of suffering, was to invite danger. These were the midwives, the herbalists, the healers. The ones who whispered cures where priests offered only prayers. The ones who read the signs in the stars, in the plants, in the rhythms of the earth. But the church did not trust what it could not control. And so these women, keepers of ancient wisdom, of forgotten rites, were branded with a single, damning word, which it mattered little if the label was earned. A healer who knew how to ease childbirth. A widow who lived alone at the edge of the village. A woman who spoke too boldly in the square. All could be accused. All could be condemned. And once the whispers began, there was no defense. They would come for you in the night. Your neighbors, your priest, perhaps even your own family. They would strip you, tie you, drown you, burn you. And if you survived the trial by water, they would say it proved your guilt. If you sank, your innocence would be cold comfort beneath the river's surface. But not all resistance was crushed in the shadows. There were those who fought openly. Women who led rebellions, who defied arranged marriages, who claimed their own space in the suffocating confines of convents and courts. They were few, but they existed. Nuns who wrote letters that shook kingdoms. Queens who ruled with iron will behind silk veils. Common women who led revolts, wielding pitchforks and fury in equal measure. Their stories, rarely carved in stone, survive only in the margins of history, in the fearful sermons of priests, in the whispered legends passed from mother to daughter. They remind us that even in the darkest chapters of the Middle Ages, there were lights that refused to dim. Even in a world that told them to obey, to serve, to kneel, some stood tall. They dared to live on their own terms, even if the cost was exile, torture, or death. And through them, the seeds of resistance were planted. Seeds that would take centuries to bloom. Seeds that would one day burst forth in revolutions, in reforms, in movements that shattered thrones and rewrote the rules. But for now, in 1325, these outcasts live on the fringes. Watching, waiting, enduring. They remind us that even in a world designed to silence them, the forgotten can still whisper. And sometimes, whispers cannot last empires. In our next chapter, we shall return to the heart of the medieval struggle. Because no matter who you were, king, peasant, outcast, or child, death was the ultimate equalizer. And its silent hand is never far behind. Shall we walk toward it, together? In the Middle Ages, death was not an unexpected visitor. It was a constant presence, an unseen guest sitting at every hearth, lurking behind every door, whispering in the cold wind that swept through the crooked streets. It did not care for titles. It did not care for prayers. It came for kings and peasants, priests and prostitutes, mothers and children alike. And when it came cruelly. You could fall to a simple infection, a shallow cut festering unseen until it sped poison through your blood. You could choke on a piece of hard bread. You could drown in a village well during a drunken stumble. But no death haunted the medieval world more than the plague. It came like a black tide, sweeping across Europe, leaving only silence in its wake. It started with a cough, a fever, then the black buboes, swollen, festering lumps beneath your arms, in your groin, along your neck. They pulsed with the rot of a body turning against itself. And within days you were gone. Your family, your neighbors, your entire village, gone. Entire towns emptied overnight. The streets filled only with the wails of those digging graves too shallow, too rushed, too many, no one was spared. Children, elders, priests, nobles, even the nobility, wrapped in their silks and hiding behind their high stone walls, found the plague seeping beneath their doors, crawling through the cracks, carried by rats, by fleas, by the very air they breathed. The death was so swift, so vast, that there were not enough priests to give last rites, not enough gravediggers to bury the dead. Bodies were thrown into pits, burned in mass pyres, left to decay in abandoned homes. The church, that eternal authority, offered little comfort. They preached that it was the wrath of God, a punishment for sins both real and imagined. Some people flogged themselves in the streets, believing that suffering would spare them. Others turned to superstition, to false cures, to scapegoats. They blamed the Jews, the foreigners, the women, but none of their hatred stopped the death. It rolled on, unstoppable, uncaring, turning bustling cities into ghost towns, kingdoms into graveyards. And when it passed, the survivors found themselves staring at an emptier, quieter world. But did life change? Not as much as you might think. The fields still needed plowing. The lords still demanded taxes. The church still preached submission. And the poor still lived in fear of the next invisible wave that would claim them. Because in the Middle Ages, death did not offer lessons. It offered only reminders. Reminders that life was fragile. That no one, no matter how powerful, how pious, how rich, could bargain with the hand that came for all. But even amid this unrelenting darkness, even as death claimed so many, people still clung to life. They rebuilt their homes. They sang songs in the night. They told stories of better days, of heroes, of miracles. They held each other a little closer. They carved tiny moments of meaning in a world that offered them none. Because that is the most stubborn truth of all. Even in the face of death, humanity endures. And now, as we approach the closing hours of your medieval day, we will step into the final refuge of the common people. Not a castle, not a church, but their dreams. Because in the next chapter, we will explore the strange, desperate hopes that flickered like candles in the hearts of those who lived and died under the crushing weight of the Middle Ages. Shall we? And now, as the fires dim, as the dirt paths grow silent under a heavy moon, we arrive at the final chapter of this medieval day. A chapter not written in scrolls or carved in stone. A chapter that lives only in the quiet places of the human heart. Because despite the hunger, the filth, the toil, the disease, and the cruel machinery of a world built to keep them bent and broken, the people of the Middle Ages dreamed. They dreamed of warmth, of love, of a day without suffering. They dreamed of lands of endless harvests, where the fields were heavy with golden wheat, and no steward hovered to take his share. They told stories of mythical lands across the sea, where no one went hungry, and no one bowed to kings. They sang of heroes who rose from the dirt to challenge the powerful, to outwit the cruel, to bring justice where none had dared. They whispered of saints who walked among them in disguise, of miracles that might arrive in the night, in the form of a healing hand, a sudden feast, a long-lost lover returning from war. They believed, perhaps because they had no other choice, that life was not always meant to be this way. Some dreamed of heaven, of a perfect afterlife where the tables overflowed with sweet fruits, where their bodies no longer ached, where the cruel lords and priests who ruled them would finally stand equal before a God who saw them as they truly were. Human, worthy, whole. Others dreamed of rebellion, of a day when they might cast off their chains and build a world not bound by birth or blood, but by the simple, stubborn truth that all people deserve dignity. But most simply dreamed of tomorrow. A tomorrow where their children might live, where the harvest might be good, where the roof might hold through the next storm, where the bread might rise just a little higher. These dreams, they were fragile. They flickered like candles against the crushing darkness. But they endured. Because even in the coldest huts, under the dirtiest blankets, in the poorest fields, the human heart refuses to stop reaching for something more. And though the Middle Ages passed, though the centuries turned, though the castles crumbled and the plagues died away, these dreams linger still. They live in us. They remind us that even in the darkest ages, even when the world seems weighed down by suffering, there is always someone, somewhere, dreaming of a better one. And tonight, as you lay in your warm bed, safe, clean, fed, and free to close your eyes without fear of rats, of lords, of the endless toll of hunger, perhaps spare a quiet thought for them, for the peasants, the mothers, the healers, the rebels, the forgotten, the nameless. They dreamed. So you might have the luxury to dream, too. And now, as our journey through the shadows of the Middle Ages comes to a close, perhaps you feel the weight of their world still lingering in your thoughts, the cold of their nights, the ache of their endless labor, the fragile warmth of their stubborn hope. If tonight's story has touched something in you, if these voices from the past whispered through the cracks of time and stirred your imagination, then perhaps let them stay with you a little longer. Share this story with a friend, someone who, like you, might enjoy walking slowly through forgotten histories, someone who listens carefully to the echoes of the past, not to escape the present, but to understand it more deeply. And if you'd like to join me again on future journeys into the overlooked, the ordinary, the hidden chapters of human history, you are always welcome to subscribe, to share a quiet comment, to become part of this small, gentle community of listeners who believe that even the most forgotten stories deserve to be heard. Because, after all, the past is never truly silent. It waits for someone to listen. And before you drift off to sleep tonight, I'll leave you with this thought. In a world like theirs, dreams were an act of quiet rebellion. Tonight, what will you dare to dream of?